finally, what we all have been waiting for and calling for and questioning why it wasn't happening. Stephanie White has stepped up to the plate in defense of Caitlin Clark. I could not believe my ears, guys. I could not believe my ears when I heard this. Stephanie White actually being bold enough to stand on business and protect Caitlin Clark.
Stephanie White just said what everyone else in the WNBA's been too afraid to admit. She went all in on how Caitlin Clark's name keeps getting tossed into every CBA discussion, even when Clark herself stays silent. And White didn't hold back or spin it nicely. She called out the league and players directly. Let's break down what she said, why it matters, and why it's striking such a nerve everywhere.
And it is Stephanie White talking about Caitlin Clark being brought up in a lot of these conversations in CBA by other people and not her speaking herself. And I think this is a really interesting one. And it's clear from this answer, I've already listened to this, it's very clear from this answer that Stephanie White clearly and Caitlin Clark, there's clearly a level of person, like they clearly really like each other as people.
Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White just dropped an interview that's sending shockwaves throughout the entire WNBA community.
Up to the plate, saying what it is, these people are using Caitlin Clark, they're disrespecting, and we can't allow it.
And no, she didn't rant or explode. She did something far more damaging to the league. She stayed calm and told the truth. Her exact words were, "I hate it all for Caitlin. She's a 23-year-old kid who loves this game, and she's a pawn in a lot of other people's games." That single line hit hard because she's right. Caitlin Clark has become the center of every WNBA debate: salaries, TV ratings, media favoritism, even officiating, no matter the topic. Her name always gets dragged into it.
And then Caitlin Clark kind of getting brought into that, Caitlin Clark responding to it. What has been your overall assessment of that dialogue and as it relates to your star player?
Yeah, I mean, I hate it all for Caitlin. I feel like, she's a 23-year-old kid who loves to play this game, who is a pawn in a lot of other people's games and a lot of other people's narratives, and I hate that for her. We're coming into a time in the WNBA where we're kind of part of the growing pains of becoming quote unquote mainstream professional sport is some of this stuff.
The craziest part is that Caitlin Clark hasn't even said anything remotely controversial this season. Yet somehow, she's been pulled into every feud like she's the source of every problem in the league. And Stephanie White has officially had enough. When she says Caitlin's being used as a pawn, she's calling out everyone, the players, the commissioner, and the media. Every side is using Caitlin to spin its own narrative. Let's be real. Caitlin Clark is the biggest name women's basketball has ever seen. She's the ratings driver, the ticket seller, the headline magnet. And when someone brings that kind of attention, everyone wants a piece. But it's gone too far. Every time a player criticizes leadership, Caitlin's name gets dragged in. Every time the WNBA rolls out a policy, it's judged by how it affects her. It's like she stopped being a person and turned into a marketing tool. And that's exactly what Stephanie White is calling out.
I do think that we are at a pivotal moment in terms of the league's history. Look, I was a part of the very first collective bargaining agreement of the WNBA where we wanted insurance all year long, to now where it is growing and players do deserve more. And leadership needs to reflect where we are as a league and also understand where we are as a league and where players' perspectives are coming from. And, we have coaches on the sidelines, and Becky Hammond and myself, and of course Noah Upland, who was in Seattle, who played in this league.
Stephanie White has watched Caitlin Clark all season long, taking elbows on the court, taking heat off it, and somehow staying composed through all of it. But let's be real. Number 23-year-old should have to carry the political weight of an entire league. When White calls Caitlin a pawn, she's not being dramatic, she's being honest. The WNBA uses her to sell tickets. The players use her to demand better contracts. The media uses her name for clicks. And the fans? They're left watching a league that looks more interested in controversy than in basketball. But here's where things get interesting. White isn't just a coach defending her star player. She's a veteran who's seen every phase of this league. She played during the WNBA's early grind years, when players were just happy to have a league. She remembers when basic healthcare and year-round pay were still pipe dreams. So when she says the current chaos is part of growing pains, she's speaking from experience. Back then, survival was the goal. Now, players want what they've earned. More money, more power, and more respect. The problem? Leadership hasn't caught up. White didn't have to name names, but everyone knew who she meant. Cathy Engelbert. At this point, every major controversy in the WNBA somehow circles back to the commissioner. From dismissing player concerns to making tone-deaf remarks about Caitlin's off-court income, Engelbert's knack for alienating both players and fans is almost impressive. So when White says, "We need better leadership," that's the diplomatic version of saying, "Cathy, get it together." And honestly, she's not wrong. Time after time, the league stumbles over the simplest issues: officiating inconsistencies, poor communication, arbitrary fines. It's like the people running things have no clue how to handle success. Because yes, the WNBA is growing, but it's growing because of the players, not because of boardroom strategy. As White put it, your employees are your number one asset. And she's absolutely right. The players are the WNBA. Yet somehow, they're still the ones being disrespected. Just look back a few weeks. Nafisa Collier lit the first match when she torched Engelbert during her exit press conference, accusing her of being tone-deaf and dismissive. Collier even claimed Engelbert once told her that Caitlin Clark should be grateful for the WNBA platform, an absurd comment considering Clark was pulling in massive nil deals, selling out arenas, and turning women's basketball into a cultural event before she even joined the league. Instead of owning up or clarifying, Engelbert responded with a robotic statement that did nothing but make things worse. Then Sophie Cunningham jumped in, calling Engelbert the most delusional leader this league has ever seen. Lexi Hull backed up Collier. Becky Hammon threw subtle shade about officiating. And now Stephanie White, the calm, measured one, is adding her voice to the chorus. If that doesn't show how deep the frustration runs, nothing will. Meanwhile, Caitlin has stayed silent through all of it. When reporters asked her about Collier's comments, all she said was, "I have great respect for Fee. She made a lot of valid points." That's it. She didn't take sides. She didn't add fuel to the fire. But her name stayed in headlines for weeks anyway because the league, the media, and even other players can't seem to stop using her as a talking point. White hates that. You can hear it in her tone. She feels protective of Caitlin, not just as a coach, but as a person. She knows the pressure that comes with being the face of the league. And here's the truth. Caitlin never asked for that title. The WNBA gave it to her the second the ratings went up. They saw the ticket sales spike and thought, perfect, she's our golden ticket. But now that the league is under fire, she's suddenly the scapegoat. That's the hypocrisy Stephanie White is calling out. She's basically saying, stop using Caitlin Clark as your shield. If you have issues with the CBA, talk about that. If you're frustrated with leadership, say it directly. But stop turning every league argument into the Caitlin Clark debate. The sad reality? It's not going to stop anytime soon, because Caitlin equals money, and money runs everything. But here's the twist. The more the WNBA exploits her image, the more fans start losing faith in the league itself. People are seeing through the PR spin now. They know when someone's being used as a distraction. And that's exactly what Stephanie White's trying to warn everyone about. Caitlin Clark isn't the league's problem. She's the proof of its potential. But unless leadership stops hiding behind her and starts fixing what's broken, all that growth the WNBA's celebrating could disappear just as fast as it came. You can tell when the league is using Caitlin Clark's image to cover its own failures. Just look at what happened earlier this season. Officials let her get thrown around on the court, and the league stayed silent. Then, once the backlash grew loud enough online, they suddenly started talking about player safety. That right there is what Stephanie White's talking about. The WNBA doesn't act when it's right, it acts when it's bad PR. And this isn't just about officiating. It's about something much deeper. Respect, communication, and listening to the people who actually make the league possible, the players. Stephanie White has been around long enough to know the difference between genuine leadership and PR fluff. And Kathy Engelbert? She's all PR talk. That's why players like Nafisa Collier and coaches like White are speaking up now, because they've seen this kind of leadership failure before. And they know it doesn't end well. The WNBA is at a real crossroads. It's got momentum, it's got stars, it's got fans paying attention more than ever before. But what it doesn't have is patience, not from the players, not from the coaches, and not from the audience. White just put that reality out in the open for everyone to see. Now, to be fair, she did something important that's easy to miss. She defended the idea of the league, even while criticizing how it's being run. She said, "This chaos is part of growing pains," and she's absolutely right. Every major sports league went through it. The NBA, the NFL, they all had moments of internal conflict and chaos before finding real stability. The difference is that those leagues learned from their mistakes because they had leadership strong enough to evolve. That's the question hanging over the WNBA now. Will its leadership actually learn? Because if it doesn't, the cracks we're seeing today are going to become full-blown fractures. And while the drama plays out behind the scenes, fans are losing interest. The focus is drifting from the court to the controversies. The basketball itself, the thing that made everyone tune in, is starting to get lost. That's what Stephanie White is trying to warn against. She's not trying to stir the pot. She's reminding everyone what's at stake. The league's credibility depends entirely on how it treats its players, especially its biggest stars. And right now, the WNBA is doing a terrible job of that. Let's be honest. Stephanie White didn't just defend Caitlin Clark. She called out the entire WNBA system, while somehow sounding like the only adult in the room. When she said, "We are part of the growing pains of becoming a mainstream league," it wasn't just a soundbite. It was a reality check. The WNBA wants the money, fame, and influence of the NBA, but it's still being run like a high school athletic department. Think about it. You've got world-class athletes flying commercial, fighting for scraps in salary negotiations, and getting fined for telling the truth, while the executives in suits collect the credit when things go right. Stephanie White's been on both sides. She played in the WNBA when it was barely hanging on, and now she's coaching during its biggest surge ever. She's not anti-league, she's anti-nonsense. So when she says Caitlin is being used as a pawn, that's her polite way of saying everyone's cashing in on Caitlin while pretending they're not. And she's right. The WNBA has built this awkward culture where everyone claims to support women's basketball, but not if it means acknowledging that one player, Caitlin Clark, is driving most of the growth. They'll plaster her face across every promo, mention her name every 5 seconds during broadcasts, and sell out arenas because of her. But the second she gets too much credit, suddenly it's a problem. She's getting too popular. She's overshadowing others. Sorry, that's what happens when someone changes the game. Michael Jordan did it. LeBron did it. Serena did it. And now Caitlin's doing it. Every sports revolution comes with jealousy, fear, and a fight for control. Stephanie White sees that, and she's smart enough to say it without blowing up bridges. But here's the irony. The WNBA doesn't seem to know how to handle success. They've been begging for mainstream attention for years, and now that they have it, they're wasting it on internal drama and tone-deaf leadership. The funniest part? Kathy Engelbert is now acting like she's the reason the league's growing. Please. The league exploded because Caitlin Clark made people care. Fans didn't start tuning in because of another commissioner press conference about sustainability. They tuned in to watch her, and every time someone points that out, Kathy acts like she's being attacked. Oh, I'm disheartened. Come on. You're not running a student council. You're running a professional league. This is the kind of fake leadership Stephanie White's talking about. Leadership that hides behind statements instead of standing beside players. Leadership means speaking up when your athletes are being targeted online or physically disrespected on the court. White's done that. Engelbert hasn't. And that's why so many people, players like Collier, outspoken voices like Sophie Cunningham, and coaches like Becky Hammon, are fed up. They're tired of decisions that make financial sense but destroy trust and morale. You can feel the frustration boiling over in different forms. Collier gives diplomatic speeches. Cunningham drops fire on the mic. White, meanwhile, just drops truth calmly and surgically. And it hits harder than any rant because it's so undeniably correct. Caitlin Clark is being used by everyone. The league uses her to convince sponsors it's growing. The media uses her for engagement. Players use her as leverage in union talks. And fans use her as an excuse to bash or defend the WNBA, depending on the day. Meanwhile, all Caitlin wants is to play basketball. She's 23. She just wants to hoop. But the politics around her are out of control. Every move she makes turns into a headline. If she smiles, she's fake. If she doesn't, she's arrogant. If she wins, it's favoritism. If she loses, she's overrated. It's insane. Stephanie White didn't just defend her player. She defended the league's future. Because if the WNBA keeps treating its biggest star like a marketing tool instead of a person, it's not just Caitlin Clark who might walk away. It's the fans. White's message is simple but powerful. Stop using Caitlin as a shield. Start fixing what's broken. And remember what made people fall in love with this game in the first place: the basketball. Because right now, the WNBA's biggest opponent isn't the competition on the court. It's itself.